Hi guys, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel, and yes, today is another author interview day and my guest is Mr. Avik Chanda, and I'll be talking to him about his book Dara, Shukoh, The Man Who Would Be King. Now the question is, was Dara Shukoh a good Mughal or a bad Mughal? Why did he choose the subject of Dara Shukoh, and many more questions? So come, let us talk to him. Okay, hi sir, thank you so much for joining in. Welcome to my channel.
Hi Natalia, thanks for inviting me to your show.
Sir, my questions are around your book Dara Shukoh. Be it Dara Shukoh or other, the Battle of Panipat or Plassey, there seems to be a tremendous among readers about history. What is your opinion about it? That why suddenly everybody has developed this interest in history?
See, I think the interest isn't sudden. The interest has always been there, but what has happened in the past, and if you take the last 20, 30 years maybe, then you can have Abraham Irali and a whole lot of other people who are writing history not for academics, but in a very popular and engaging way. So that is allowing history to come alive in front of a general audience, not just a specialist academic audience. And if you look at the last maybe 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, there's a huge influx of new writers who are writing not in an academic fashion, but sometimes in a more novelistic fashion, sometimes in a far more engaging fashion, and then therefore reaching out to a larger mass. And I'll actually go beyond books. So even if you're talking about films, for example, and just take last year, so there was Manikarnika that was released around the 1857 revolution and Rani of Jhansi, and then latter part of the year there was the Battle of Panipat based on the third Battle of Panipat that was released. Now I'm not talking about whether it made box office hits or flops, we all know the story, but the point is readers as well as viewers are glued on because they want to know more about the past. There's been a lot of myth-making, there's been a lot of confusion, there's been some amount of rewriting of history, some of it by design, some of it maybe inadvertently or accidentally, or even as a function of carelessness. And people really want to know more about their past. I think that's very important in our culture.
Sir, why did you choose Dara Shukoh as a character in your book? Any specific reason that you were inclined towards this character?
So before that, I'll talk to you about my previous book. Okay, so the previous book, which came out about 2.5, 3 years back, also published by HarperCollins, was a business book. Okay, now that business book did pretty well, and here is the temptation for any author. Once something gets traction, gets nice press, good reviews, good traction from the readers, there's always a tendency, in fact, I'll say there's always a temptation to do one more of the same. So that temptation came my way as well. So I had the option of doing yet another business book, like another part 2, part 3, etc., or to do something which is completely different. And I chose the latter. And I told myself, look, I'm going to do a book on history, on Indian history. And right up front, I knew that this was not going to be a book on an event or a particular episode. So for example, Battle of Panipat, Battle of Plassey, Battle of Buxar, or the revolution, but it's going to be about a historical personage. I also kind of knew in my mind that it was going to be about a Mughal. Okay. Now, when I started to do my reading, my research, I thought, okay, right from Babur to the last Mughal, a number of the significant characters have already been dealt with in a great level of sympathy, granularity by a number of people. So if you're talking about Akbar, so many people have written about Akbar and are still continuing to write about Akbar. For example, this year, Ramakotti's book on Akbar has come out. This in spite of the fact that there was another book, Allahu Akbar, that came out last year and then before that as well. So I thought, okay, there's Akbar, there's Jahangir, there's Shah Jahan, there's Aurangzeb, Audrey Trushke's book, very, very noted, well-known, controversial for all kinds of reasons, most of it political. I said, all right, who is the person who is extremely complex, very, very interesting, but has not really been written about in decades, if not centuries? And then I thought, all right, there is Dara Shukoh. We get glimpses of him when we are talking about Shah Jahan, when we are reading about Shah Jahan. We get glimpses of him, plus some, when we are reading about Aurangzeb or about Jahanara. But every time it's a glimpse. He's just waiting in the wings. So I thought, let's do a book on Dara Shukoh where the spotlight is on him and everybody else, all the other characters, no matter how big and how great and how noble, they recede into the background, they recede into the shadows. And my reading also told me that in the 350 or 360 plus years post Dara Shukoh's death, in English there have been just 2 full-length books. One in the early 1930s and another one in the early 1950s. And I thought, okay, this is a long enough time for Dara Shukoh's story to be retold in an engaging manner, in an accessible manner for the general readers.
So your book is non-fiction. At many times it reads like a novel. What is the stylistic approach you followed, and how did you go about doing your research?
Okay, so yes, I was careful in the treatment, in the tone that I had for the book. Right up front, this was quite a sort of collaborative effort. So I was in discussion with my agent, Priya Doraswamy, as well as my editor, Rahul Soni. And I said, look, this particular subject, this particular figure of Dara Shukoh, we can treat it in multiple ways. It can be historical fiction to begin with, where there is a lot more of the dramatization and there are imaginings and there are things which may not have happened as such, but still kind of form and help to flesh out the overall character or give a sense of that canvas and of that time. That's one approach. The second approach is to do it in a very serious, almost academic fashion as a non-fiction biography. And then there's a third approach where it's still completely factually oriented, research-based, and yet the tone, it should read as if it's a novel. So which of these 3 should I do? And both of them said, Avik, it's number 3. Write as if it's a novel, except that whenever you're thinking, okay, this is too lyrical, did that really happen? And at the end of that paragraph, you have a little superscript. And then you can go back to the end note, and that's backed like by 3 or 4 different kinds of references, which show you that, yes, this really happened. It's not just an imagining of the author. So, and I think that kind of a treatment worked for this particular book, because that is, that's the feedback that I've got from several reviewers, several journalists, and a great mass of readers who appreciated the book have told me we've liked it because it read as a page turner. We've liked it because it did not seem very heavy. In spite of the fact that it's like a 100,000 word book, it did not seem very heavy, and at no point of time was it overwhelming, with facts and figures and too much of data sort of overflow. So I think that kind of worked. In terms of research, I break it down into 3 different categories. The first is, and this was, I would say, a shortcoming, definitely, that I did not access the original manuscripts in Farsi, me not being a Farsi scholar. So I did the next best thing, because most of the manuscripts back in the day, those which were written by the Mughals and by their official chroniclers, were in Farsi, were in Persian. So I, through my research, found that there is very, very authenticated, faithful, detailed, non-interpolative translations that are available. So that was my first port of call. The second port of call, which is very interesting, is what the Europeans saw and experienced and wrote about the same events. So let's say you have Jahangir writing together with his scribes, the Tutuki Jahangiri or Jahangir Nama or Iqbal Nama. And at the same time, you have a Thomas Rowe who's at the court of Jahangir. So you get a very, very different perspective, a very different lens and prism about the same kind of thing. So that just got me more nuances and more complexity. That was like the second thing. And the third, if you're talking about Mughal history over the last, I would say 100 plus years, talk about the early 1900s, where Sir Jodhanath Sarkar was writing his monumental multiple sort of volumes on the history of Aurangzeb right up to today. So that's more than 100 years. Tremendous wealth, ocean of scholarship around the Mughal period, around the great Mughals, particularly around the time of Shah Jahan and Aurangzeb. And I was able to source all of that. So that was like the third category. So these three sort of put together made sure that I had all my facts and figures in place. And therefore, based on that, I could then build the character and build the narrative of my story.
Last question. Dara Sukho was a dreamy king. Is being dreamy a good thing, or one should be very practical? And if given a choice to play between Dara Sukho and Aurangzeb, who will you choose and why?
That's a very, very difficult question to answer. But let's first talk about the characterization. You see, unfortunately, what has happened in the common parlance, right? The usual narrative is that Dara Shikoh was the good Mughal, Aurangzeb is the bad Mughal. Good Muslim, bad Muslim. Even anachronistically, Dara Shikoh is the good Indian, which automatically makes the kettle black. So Aurangzeb is the bad Indian. The truth is far more murky, it's far more complicated than that. If you're talking about Dara Shikoh just alone, and all of them were extremely complicated, complex, multi-layered personalities, Aurangzeb, Shah Jahan, all of the great Mughals. But Dara Shikoh alone, so on the positive side, he was a poet, philosopher, calligrapher, connoisseur of the fine arts, theologian, chronicler, scholar, and a man with truly original, visionary, syncretic ideas that were years, like centuries ahead of his time. So all of this is on one side of the scale. On the other side of the scale, he was a very indifferent, disinterested, bored administrator, did not worry, did not care about politics, about administration, about statecraft. At best, a very indifferent, mediocre commander in the field of battle. Again, lack of interest in leading from the front. And last but not the least, could be very easily swayed by sycophants, by all manners of mystics and soothsayers and astrologers and yogis and fakirs and dervishes, very prone to following auguries and omens, and quite a poor judge of human character. So when you take the sum total of all this, you get a very, very complicated sort of mosaic of a person. So it's not black or white anymore, right? Similarly, as my book shows, it's not demonized Aurangzeb and deified Dara Shikoh. So that was something that I was very careful to do. So even when you look at Aurangzeb, you do see redeeming features, particularly when it comes to his diplomacy, his astuteness in understanding the political nuances and dynamics, which is something people don't really talk about. Before he became Alamgir, he was able to woo, he was able to court and coax and cajole a large number of the Rajput chiefs over to his cause. So it just shows people in a far more sort of well-rounded and well-fleshed out sort of manner. You know, various shades across the spectrum instead of just black or white. That's what I've tried to do.
Sir, it was lovely talking to you, and it was a very interesting insight on the life of Dara Sukho, which you gave, a character which is not that well known as his other counterparts are.
Yeah.
So it was really very interesting, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for the interview.
Right. Thanks so much. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you.
So guys, we were in conversation with Mr. Avik Chanda. You have any questions, my email address is given below. And yes, do share your views and comments. It's always very encouraging. Don't forget to tune in. As you know, I post in videos 4 times a week. Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday and Sunday. The time is 7:30 p.m. Do tune in. And yes, do take good care of yourself. That is very important. And keep smiling. Take care. Bye.